moment of silence. Amen.
Amen.
Do I hear a motion for the
So moved.
I'll second.
moved and properly seconded that we approve the minutes of April 27th, 2021? All in favor, say aye.
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 Item 4.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Was there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and properly seconded for the naming of the new track at Stony Field in honor of Olympian Raven Saunders. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilmember? Yes, Chairman.
Yes?
we have a couple of hands up. Council members Saccharin, Griffin, and Mayor Tecklenburg have their hands up.
Okay, in that order, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. How did we get, I'm fully supportive of this. I'm just wondering how this got on the Recreation Committee agenda and who made that decision or recommendation?
I think
Chairperson Gregory, this is Lori. If you'd like for me to take this one, I will.
would you
Yes, sir. Councilmember Saccharin, we received a phone call from a community member, Tony Lewis, several months ago at our office. And he had been talking to her representative and some folks that are really on her team, so to say, for training and everything. And they knew about the idea and were really in favor of it, but she did not know. It was a secret. So we went ahead and took it to the Citizen Recreation Committee. They passed it unanimously at their last meeting. And so they knew it was coming forward. The track obviously is not going to be ready at the same time as the football field, but it will be done several months after that. And now her team does know that it is going to be named in her honor. And we are trying to work with her rep to see if she can join us next Tuesday at your big meeting by Zoom to participate. I'm not sure she'll be able to, given her training schedule and the hours and things like that are different here, but we'll definitely be working with them. But that was the idea.
Thank you, Lori. If you all could just indulge me for 1 minute. The reason I'm very supportive of this is I got a chance to meet Raven in my previous role with the district. And if you all could see, she was a dynamo, and I was working in the communications office. I got wind of her story, met with her before she graduated Burke. She was over at Burke learning how to do shot put in the parking lot. Had to go on YouTube to learn how to do shot put. And from 9th grade to 10th grade, she was basically learning how to do shot put on YouTube. Natural ability, and she's a remarkable person, and this is completely fitting. So when she does confirm, I would love to be, and I think I will be in attendance to that, but I just want to say hi to her, and I think we should recognize her at a future council meeting as well. I mean, she is a true remarkable story and star, coming from nothing in Charleston, learning how to do shot put in the parking lot over at Burke. So remarkable story.
Del Chapo?
I think Councilmember Griffin was next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just want to get some clarification on how the naming would go. Would it be called the track, the Raven Saunders track at Stony Field? Or, I mean, because I certainly don't want to take away from Stony Field. How would that naming go?
I think exactly the way you said it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And this is something that happens around the country. Stadiums have names, fields have names. All of our stakeholders are investing a lot in this track. And honestly, it probably wouldn't be possible without contributions that Raven has made. Who knows, Councilmember Saccharin, maybe we'll find the next Olympian at Burke High School, and instead of having to throw shot put in the parking lot, they'll be able to utilize this amazing track. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and look forward to seeing the track, the Raven Saunders track at Stony Field.
Mayor Tecklenburg?
So I'll just reiterate comments of council members Saccharin and Griffin, what an inspiration Raven is, a great role model. And so did y'all see her, the clip of her just recently when she had her longest shot?
Yes, yes. Yes.
You hear her afterwards? She said, Charleston, South Carolina. And it made me so proud of her. And I, of course, this was already in the works, and it was just like, wow, we are doing the right thing. I'm so proud of her. Win, lose, or draw, whatever happens in Tokyo, she's an inspiration for our community, and I hope she can join us Tuesday. But I'm so looking forward to announcing this at council next week. And if she can't join us, then we'll have her to join us after the Olympics.
Okay, thank you for that, Mayor. And if I might just add, especially with regard to practicing in the parking lot, when I went to Burke High School, and we did have shot put as one of the activities, we actually had a marked field over on Harmon Field, where that kind of practice took place. So I'm hoping with the new Stony Field, we'll be able to have similar opportunities for future Olympians to practice at. The next is.
Mr. Chairman, we need to finish
That's
the.
right, we didn't vote. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposes? The ayes have it. Item number 5, Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Mayor Tecklenburg.
Maybe I suggest that we have the presentation first, and then I'm happy to make a motion now or then for approval or acceptance. I would like, if it please you, Mr. Chairman, just make a couple of remarks before they start.
Sure.
And that mostly is just to thank Pat Hoagland and Tom O'Rourke for what really has been an amazing journey of sorts, an amazing job to produce this master plan for the city of Charleston. It was long needed, I must tell you. The day after I walked in the door, first time I really sat down with Jason Kronsberg and Laurie Yarborough both, they said, Mayor, we really need a real analysis of where we are, what we've got, what's needed to think about the long term. And admittedly, it took us a few years to get around to getting Tom and Pat hired up to do this. But they've done a remarkable job. And to think that they did this during COVID, and so much of it involved public engagement. So they didn't rely on the old fashioned way of, putting up the flag, having a meeting and expecting folks to come to them. They went out in the field, they went on the greenway, they went to sporting events, they talked to kids, they talked to parents, they talked to our citizens. And I really believe that they have a true representation of the sense of importance to our citizens of parks and recreation programs and facilities. It's, beyond keeping people safe, it's the one thing we do that really adds to our citizens' quality of life. And I think it rings true loud and clear in what you're about to hear. So without further ado, I just want to thank Pat and Tom for their incredible efforts, along with Jason and Laurie.
Hey, Mayor, if I might add, I'd also like to just thank the entire master planning committee, who attributed greatly to what I deem as a really, really great product. I have gone through it best I can in the time period I have, and it's extremely thorough. And the one thing that I gleaned from it in your surveys is that most of the residents of the city of Charleston thinks that we have pretty good parks now. And I think we owe all that to our parks director, our capital improvement folks. In spite of what may be lacking, what they have done in our over 140 parks with their current budget allocation is remarkable, particularly as it relates to the perception of the residents and what they've done. And with that, Tom, Patrick, I just had to say it, okay? And again, this cannot be a plan, Mayor, that's gonna sit on the shelf like a whole lot of the other ones, hopefully.
Oh, we don't have a lot of plans sitting on the shelves around here.
All right, let's try to figure it out. Thanks.
Hey,
Tom?
You're on mute, Tom.
Patrick?
yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. And Pat, you can start, and I know I'm out of order, but I love Raven Saunders. I've been coaching track in this town for 30 years. Still do. I was at West Ashley High School last year. And that woman, by the time she was a senior, she was better than everybody. She spent more time helping other athletes to learn the event of shot put than she did working on her own game. And Bishop England High School actually helped sponsor her in her first journey. But she is a wonderful woman, and I know it's not my business, but I'm so happy that you've decided to recommend the name of the facility after her. And Pat will start, but I will say too before we get started, everybody whose face is on this thing owns this. You've all been responsible, especially Councilmember Gregory, with your leadership. So the nice thing about this plan, it's not our plan. It's every one of your citizens, and it's your plan. And I'm glad you mentioned Jason and Lori, because we've driven them crazy, because we made sure that we didn't take any step until we told them what we were thinking about. And you do have an amazing city. So without making this too long, we're going to walk you through a pretty large overview, and we're going to try to hit the highlights. But I will say we're not done yet. We've still got more work before we wrap this thing up. So Pat.
All right. Well, I'll start by saying, Mayor Tecklenburg and Councilmember Gregory, we couldn't ask for a better introduction. So thank you very much. We may use that in some promotional material down the road. This is on YouTube, but I'm going to share the screen here and get my PowerPoint up and put together a presentation. Oops. And unfortunately, there we go. So now when we started this process, there was really 5 things we wanted to do. One was to identify what the citizens wanted. Second was identify those gaps and inequities in the system. Assess the conditions of your current system. Went out to all your parks, looked at everything, plan for the future, and then look at how you pay for it. And we've done that through a whole series of steps here, starting out with an evaluation of your existing facilities, programs, and system. And then the engagement, again, as the mayor pointed out, it was a challenge. We had to step back and make some changes, but I think it was really, really good what we heard from the people, and probably better than those typical town hall meetings by going out and talking to people. And then from that, working with about over 40 staff members to come up with a new vision for the future based on what we heard from the public. And now we're in this point where we're wrapping up the plan, and you've got a draft. There's going to be some edits to it as you give us some information. We wanted to give you a little bit of the background in some of this, not there's so much in those 500 plus pages, but just give you a few things. We looked at a 10-minute walk to your existing neighborhood parks or larger parks. And the 10-minute walk to a park is a campaign of the National Recreational Park Association, the Urban Land Institute, and the Trust for Public Land. And in your case, you've got about 51% of your residents, so just barely a little over half, that are within that 10-minute walk to a neighborhood park. And that's important to people's livelihoods, to their health, and to property values as well. So that's something that to be looked at. So there's some gaps there. Then we also looked at a walk and a drive time to your larger community parks, regional parks, and some of the county and state parks in the area. And you got much better coverage there, but there's still some gaps, especially in the lower and upper parts of the peninsula, and some other areas where there's gaps in the delivery. The green areas show those areas that are accessible to those facilities. And then we looked at not just those two maps, but we mapped like 11 different facilities. Like we did a map for recreation centers and a map for aquatic facilities and pools, another one for playgrounds and tennis courts and basketball courts. When you lay all those on top of each other, you get this map, which shows you those areas in red are the very low service areas that don't have much service, and the areas in blue have high service areas. So you see most of the peninsula area has pretty good service because there's a lot of parks. The upper portion of the peninsula it's got more red and orange colors to it. A lot of outer West Ashley is got a lot of the red and orange colors, so it's less service levels there, whereas inner West Ashley has more facilities to be offered. Johns Island has very little. You see a lot of red out in that area, and then pockets throughout the rest of the community. You notice that the maps don't go all the way up into Cainhoy beyond Daniel Island, just because there wasn't much up there at this point, and it just made our maps a lot smaller. So we concentrated on the areas that we could really see. And then we did a process we called a social needs and conditions index. When you see all these facilities, these factors on the left-hand side, income, education, unemployment, single parent households, crime, residents under 18, where the kids live, over 65, persons with disabilities, and then population density and poverty. So look at all those social conditions and you factor all those together and you end up with a map like this that shows those areas in red are those areas that would benefit the most from social services, not just parks and recreation, but any kind of services. Those areas in blue have better social needs and conditions. So again, it shows you a lot of especially the inner West Ashley and a lot of the peninsula areas where people could benefit the most from social services and including parks. So and then we take those two analyses and put them together, and it shows those areas that have low service areas and high social needs issues, and upper portion of the peninsula, and then in portions of West Ashley and parts of James Island, where those are really good target areas for you to improve the quality of life for the residents in those areas. And we'll talk a little bit about citizen engagement. Tom, you want to?
Yeah, I would like to highlight the fact that it was the opposite of COVID getting in our way when it came to community engagement. As the mayor said previously, we didn't have time or the ability to have people come to us for meetings, so we went to them. And the reason we wanted to use this picture, it should make you all very proud of the work that you do. But if you see the girl with the green shirt on, that's what we wore every time we went out to a park. And it says, "Let's talk Parks and Rec." And this was at where the MLK pool is. I forget the name of Flips Community Center, but it's an amazing place. And we assisted with food drive, which took part during COVID. So the scope of the work of serving was great, but we found those activities where we knew people would be there, and the entire community came out for those food drives. So we were there. And what I would do is I would pull them aside on the basketball court and we would just talk to them about how things were going. So we did this in every single region of the community. In fact, at Cainhoy, we were at the convenience store. I don't even know if it has a name, but it's got the chicken place there and the convenience store. And we had as many people there as anywhere else that we met. But we learned a lot. And we learned that it's almost like the haves and the have-nots. Of course, there's people that are really happy. You've got some really great facilities in certain parts, and you don't have any in other parts. So it was good. The other thing that it enabled us to do during COVID, during citizen engagement, there were a lot of people that utilized the parks. That's where people went. And the one that's stuck in my mind is when I went out to Johns Island, the soccer field had soccer games going on all the time with 2 teams playing and 2 teams waiting on Johns Island. This was not a planned rec department activity. These were just people that came out to play because COVID kept them all inside. And what was so amazing about this was the diverse community members that were there. And it was so great to go to the people in between games that were sitting in the back of their pickup trucks. There's a very large Latino community on Johns Island, and they were there and they were using. And one of the things that you'll see that we got from the citizens engagement was they want a little bit more unsupervised play. So we were able to add that into our recommendations, and we were even able to add that into some of the capital things, just to have these spaces that people can just go and utilize their parks without it being programmed all the time. So we did everything with citizens engagement you can imagine. The online surveys were great. The handouts, the web surveys, the Mind Mixer site was great. But the thing that we got the most out of are the people that we just actually stopped and engaged with us. And as I said, your citizens are happy.
Right. And we also attended all of the city plan work sessions and the public
Yes.
meetings there, and reviewed all the data from those as well. So we have incorporated a lot of the recommendations from the city plan into this plan as well. They're all
Mhm.
cross-referenced, the
Yes.
ones that apply.
Yeah.
So I want to make a few of the highlights of this. Just here's one that shows some of the common themes we've heard. Upgrading your existing parks, restrooms in the parks, looking at some of those underserved areas, dog parks, improved accessibility. So a lot of preservation of open space. So, and trails were something that really came up really, really high without reading through all these, but those
Yeah.
are some of the common themes we saw throughout the process.
Yes.
And a few of the mail survey, that's a statistically valid survey of every residence that was done on a random sample. And we had one question asked for the priority for facilities. And it's a combination of 2 questions. One is, what are the unmet needs that you have? And then the other one is, what are the most important facilities to you, your family, and your household? And the ones in blue at the top of those high priority areas, walking and hiking trails, was 100 on both. It was the highest on both of those questions on the surveys. But natural areas, nature parks, it's not all about ball fields and rec centers. They like those outdoor spaces, paved trails, canoe kayak launches, small neighborhood parks, swimming pools, all those high priority areas. We asked the same question for programs, and you'll see at the top 5 or 6 there, 6 I guess, that are in blue, the high priorities. Concerts, art performances, movies, and special events are all those types of things that bring a community together. Those activities that really make you feel a sense of community that people would like to see. Plus, fitness and wellness is huge. More nature-oriented programs, and programs for persons over age 50 are some of the top high priorities that we see there, along with all the other programs. And then we asked, what services should the city focus on the most? And you see at the top of the list is acquiring and preserving open space and natural areas. As this city continues to grow at a rapid pace, you need to plan for that. That's what the city plan is all about, trying to plan for some of those. And this plan and the city plan combined together will give you that background. So you can't wait until the developers gobble it all up. Upgrading your existing parks and facilities was a common thing we saw everywhere. Just fix up what we have. We've got some good stuff. We just need to make it better. And a lot of it's old. New trails and connecting your existing trails, and then acquiring land for rec facilities and the programs for youth and others, just new pools. So there's a lot of important actions people would like to see. In general, in terms of the public engagement, bike paths, nature parks, connectivity and trails throughout the community. The West Ashley Greenway is so popular to so many people, but continuing that on with the low line in other areas that connect them together. Performances, concerts, health and wellness are all extremely important. And the great thing about this is we ask the question in a lot of the surveys when we do this, how willing are you to support some type of a tax or a bond referendum to pay for this? And typically we see, pretty much a straight 25% in all 4 quadrants. But in your case, it was extremely high. You got 69% they would strongly support or moderately support all those things they said they wanted in the survey. Only 5% they would not support. This is much higher than we've ever seen in doing these surveys of communities. And we recently did one in Garland, Texas, and it's a city outside of Dallas, about 186,000. And as a result of a question like this, they passed a $117 million bond just for parks. It was amazing with a real high level of approval rating. So I think that we've got, yes, sir.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Sure.
And I looked through the plan. Is there any distinction that you make between renters and homeowners in terms of their perceptions?
No, we did not.
And the reason why I raise that question is because if we take the recommendations on how to fund it,
Right.
It will have more of a direct effect on homeowners. That is not to say, however, that renters may have to pay higher rents in order for the owners to be able to pay the higher tax. But it
Right.
just would be interesting information to have, when we do these surveys, whether
Right.
that person is a homeowner or a renter, because it might be distinguished, it might be very, very different.
It could be. We don't have that data. We didn't ask that question on the survey. We asked a lot of demographic questions, but not that one. So we had information on income levels and race and ethnicity, but not on home ownership. So that is a good point, though.
And if I can jump in for 1 second, and I don't mean to fast forward to the end because that's not what I want to do, but there will be a recommendation in our plan that is going to recommend that you ask the citizens in a referendum to pay for these things. And I've never seen numbers this high as far as citizens willing to do this. So I think if I were an elected person, and I actually am one sitting at Mount Pleasant, we have a council meeting tonight. I think it's good when you can let the citizens give their own tax increase to themselves, as opposed to you just issuing it to them on your own. If here's a survey that says they would pay for it, now you officially go out and ask them if they would. And so that is eventually what we are working towards. And I did want to, I don't want to, as long as we're on this slide, I wanted to make you aware of that right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Griffin has his hand up.
Oh, good.
I've got a question about this while we're talking
Sure.
about this money. $120 million went on the survey. Did y'all, well, how was the question posed about a bond referendum?
Yeah, we didn't get into detail at that. We're trying to get more general information at that point. We didn't ask how much they'd be willing to pay.
Right,
That
okay,
usually
so
would be
there
done in a
wasn't-
follow-up survey.
Okay, because $120 million is an absurd amount of money compared to the bond referendums that we've seen. 4 years ago, we had a $20 million bond referendum. 120 is obviously in a completely different realm. But
Right.
you also have to take into consideration the fact that a lot of people don't necessarily understand that a bond referendum is a tax increase. How was that worded on the survey? Was it worded as a bond referendum or was it worded as a tax increase? Because, go ahead, Tom.
Great question, great points. The question was simply, would you support?
A
Now,
bond referendum.
everything you said makes perfect sense. We gave you a number, but what isn't done yet, we are not asking you to spend $117 million. there is only a certain amount of money that citizens can absorb. But more importantly, there's only a certain number of projects that Jason and his staff are going to be able to do. So I think the discussions that are going on now, like at today's meeting, we're not going to ask you to support any number or any bond number. But what will be done with your finance staff, with a list, is how much of this elephant can the city actually bite off? And I don't for a second think that it's going to be $117 million at all. So discussions will be, what is that number? What can they absorb? And then the elected officials, yourself and everyone else, will have a discussion to decide what that sweet spot may be.
And at no point am I trying to downplay the intelligence of our community. That's not what I'm saying. But bond referendum is a choice of words that a layman may not even understand. And if you just pose the question, at all of the different rec centers, hey, would you support a bond referendum to get new facility? Heck yeah, I would. But there's language in there that I don't know if you asked all those people, well, would you support us raising your taxes to do it? They might say, that might be you might get a different answer there. So I'm just want to make sure we're talking apples to apples.
Right. Yeah. That's fair point.
Yeah, that's fair point. Okay, good.
Any other questions? I thought those were great points, Councilman Griffin.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk a little bit, just to resolve things quickly through the strategic plan and then some of the draft recommendations. We worked with over 40 members of the staff through a variety of exercises we went through to develop a vision, mission, values, goals, and objectives. So I'll just go through these quickly. Well, vision for the future is we strive to be a national leader in citizen and visitor-focused parks and recreation offerings. And your mission is what you're all about, is building community and enriching lives through quality parks and recreation experiences. And then we also came up with a whole series of values that are important to your department, to the city, but welcoming experiences, inclusivity, environmental stewardship, healthy living, operational excellence, and cultural stewardship. Some of the key values to work around. And then there's 4 goal areas. The first one is health and wellness for all our residents. And some of the objectives and the sort of the subtopics underneath there are objectives, or our athletics, facilities, wellness, social services. And then all of our recommendations fall within these categories as well. Natural and cultural resources is community treasures is goal 2. So stewardship, outdoor beauty, access, history, art and culture, and resilience are all key parts of that goal area. And the third one is durable services for our community. So operations and maintenance, funding, staff and volunteers, and the local support are the key parts under that goal. And then the final goal is accessible connectivity through our community. So equity in terms of the facilities and programs you offer, trails and wayfinding, just connect the community, shared encounters, again, as I mentioned before, those types of events and activities that bring a community together. Then partnership and collaboration. You can't do this all by yourself. You need help, you need partners, and there are partners out there that are already working with you and that will continue to work with you throughout this process. So those are some of the key goals. And our recommendations have some main themes that sort of follow those, but the growth of the community, consistency throughout the whole community, and equity and service, financial security, being able to sustain the system financially. Equity and inclusion are important throughout all the parks and the programs. Your accountability to your residents and citizens, the workforce that you have to keep those parks in a great condition and keep those programs running great. The collaborations with other organizations, flooding and resiliency is a key issue. And then the credibility, developing a credible department. So Tom, I'll let you talk about some of these.
Yeah, we took a look at the actual operations of the department, and it's certainly.
Before we move on, just one quick question I've got to ask you. How are you guys defining equity?
I think there's not one definition, Councilmember Gregory. I think equity is involved in human equity. It's involved, and that takes us back to the social needs and conditioning, but it's also equity in offerings and program offerings and where they're offered. So equity is not a one definition answer. We tried to bring equity into every single thing that we examined.
And so then you do have data showing areas of minority, people of color concentrations, and of course,
Yes.
the conditions of the particular parks or projects in those areas. Because it would be interesting to see that data, to see whether or not parks in certain areas might get more attention than parks in other areas. This is where the equity comes in.
Yeah.
Okay. Because those parks that were not getting, okay, what they should have been, may have to get more, okay, in order for equity to exist. So that's some of the data, again, that would be interesting to take a look at some point.
Well, we have it, Councilmember Gregory, and believe me, we have it, and all of your points are good. We'll make sure they're highlighted in such a way that when the decisions are made of where the dollars are spent, that's taken into consideration.
Okay, and that was my point. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Saccharin has his hand up.
Councilman Saccharin?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to piggyback on Chairman Gregory's point, I guess, is there a way to get this data so we can look at it? And I'm guessing when you all did the data point where you said 51% live within a 10-minute walk, that's disaggregated by race, right?
Yes, we do have. Well, that's a different analysis. The results of the statistically valid survey, we have race, ethnicity, and also where they live. Okay. One of the 5 different service districts that we call them, which one do they live in? So we've done an analysis by those types of things.
Because to Councilman Gregory's point, it's not just a condition of the facilities, but it's the access to any facility.
Right.
Oh, of course.
Would be the second question that I would like to see the data on. But
right, and then that's why we did the whole series. I didn't show them all here today, but a whole series of maps showing those walk times and drive times to every type of park and every type of facility. So we can really see, for example, the fact that there's a demand for a rec center in inner West Ashley shows up clearly because there's nothing in that area. But you don't see that when you look at the overall, the conglomerate of the map, but you do see it when you look at the individual map.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, those are really important points. And to continue on,
Sure.
This is a 10-year plan. We have a recommendation to look at different management of this department into the future. And we looked at taking this city and putting it into 5 different geographical areas. And actually, Pat, you can go to the next one.
Okay.
What we want to have is what the city of Charleston does so well right now. You have core services that you really, really are great doing. These are aquatic services. You teach people how to swim as well as any community. You have indoor recreation centers, outdoor field space, outdoor court space. Trails are important, water access, outdoor gathering spaces, and structures for fun and fitness like playgrounds and things like that. That's what you do. Those are your core services. We want to make sure that the 5 regions within the city each have these core services in them. So if an area doesn't have a pool, you'll see our recommendations towards that. You'll see Inner West Ashley that has a lot of facilities doesn't have that indoor gym. So we looked at that. But as far as providing the services, Pat, you can go to the next slide. Here's what we looked at. We looked at the recreation director being responsible for the 5 district supervisors. We're not going to get caught up right now in semantics of what the name is, whether even you want to use district. You may use whatever you want. But there are 5 areas where 10 years from now, the citizens that live in that pocket need to know that person. Not necessarily Laurie, but the person who's there with them. One of the disturbing things talking to people in the Cane Hoy Peninsula area, that's what we call it, is the people up along the Cane Hoy Road area feel like Daniel Island isn't their park. They felt as if it was something totally separate, and it's not. But one person there can bring all these things together. One of the things that not only, I think I remember Councilmember Gregory whispering in my ear, even at the interview before we were even selected, was we're going to have to figure out how we're going to pay for these things. And I understand that. You all know where I worked. And finding ways to pay for things are important. We feel like there should be a position called enterprise manager that actively seeks out things to be done in your community that are going to bring in revenue to this community. Right now, you have a very efficient system because permits are given out and they're followed up on and money is collected. They're efficient in management, but they're certainly not lucrative as it comes to actual costs that should be charged. For example, let's say there's a 5K running series on Daniel Island. The person gets a permit, they charge their rates, they make a lot of money, and the city gets their $25 permit fee. An enterprise manager could meet with people that put on these events in the area and say, I want 20% of the gross. Tournaments that are recruited, all types of tournaments that can be recruited into this city can go through this enterprise manager with a percentage being given. In your report, you will see a very quickly done way to show a $200,000 revenue amount in the first year by somebody that's an enterprise manager. And I think it can be double that, but we wanted to be conservative. And this will grow and grow and grow. Without any disrespect to the current staff, I don't think you have that person on your staff right now. You have people with a big heart. You have people that want to meet and give out food to the community members, but you don't have an entrepreneur that is figuring out how to get as much money fairly from your users as you possibly can. That's not an insult, but there are people out there. And we've had one question at one time saying, well, how do you pay them? Do you pay them percentages? No, they're an employee like everybody else. And they fit into the range, but they are judged on and evaluated on the more and more things that can be done that can bring in money. I believe strongly that an enterprise manager can highlight your facilities when they're not used. And the reason I showed this chart is because this enterprise manager is going to be working with all 5 district leaders to be able to say, hey, what's available next weekend? What's available over here? And they use all 5 districts to generate this revenue. So that's how we see the staffing going. We are not saying that on the first day when we leave that Laurie takes her department to this level. We're saying that it is, and we're not saying add new employees. We're saying gradually do this so that in 10 years, this is how you're operating.
And that will address a lot of the equity issues as well, because you're going to be trying to get, services through all 5 of those areas.
Yes. Yes.
So, a few things your citizens are telling us is, equity analysis is important. We're looking at where those facilities go in the programs, the overall needs per district. And we do have sections in the plan that talk about the deficiencies in each of those 5 planning areas. The capital facilities replacement program is extremely important, because a lot of things are just getting old. And the facility assessment funding, we did an assessment of every park. And then there undeveloped parks, you've got land that they're the Bear Swamp and Dill Tract, for example, that are great opportunities for development of filling some of those gaps in this community. oops, sorry. So in terms of finances, an analysis of the cost and what does it cost you to run your programs and to operate your facilities, just to know the true cost of those things is something that in one of our communities we recently worked in, hired a summer intern to just do that, just minimum wage, pretty much job, trying to, looking at all the costs to analyze that. Tom mentioned the expanded enterprise opportunities. We talked about the taxpayer-funded capital assessment, and then grants and philanthropic opportunities. There's plenty of money in Charleston, and there's grants out there that can help. It's not going to pay for all of it, but it's going to help pay for some of it. And even those grants are mostly cost shared or by just a portion of the project.
And Pat, if I can add to that too,
Sure.
You have philanthropic groups right here. You've got the Friends of the Lowline. You've got the Parks Conservancy. These are people that we have had very frank discussions with them about their responsibility to be raising funds. Not only raising funds for them, but raising funds for the department as well, for the underserved. And very receptive on these things. And you'll see those expanded upon in the report as well.
And then, Tom, you want to continue on these?
Yeah. You have positions right now that are not filled. And I know, I personally know that it's going to be very difficult to walk in and say, hire this many new people, that many new people. There's a lot of issues with hiring a lot of new people, and it's not cheap. And the post-employment benefits, it just adds and adds and adds. But we are asking you to at least fill the vacant positions that you had before. And I think that if you can get the staff to the level that the staffing's at, it'll address a lot of the issues that are out there. For example, restrooms. Restrooms might have been the number one thing in community input. And a lot of times it's not about, is there a restroom? It's about the ability to have the restroom open and clean. But there are positions that have been taken away that sometimes get in the way of that. So without getting into a lot of detail, filling the vacant positions is a recommendation that we have that we think should work. Also, during COVID.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Saccharin just had his hand up.
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer, and thanks, Chairman. Tom, I guess the question I have, and I'm not speaking for Lori, but we go through this right now, in the after-school program with the school district. In terms of like hourly rates that we're paying our staff, it's easy to say fill the vacant positions, but I guess my question is part of these recommendations a uptick in the hourly rate we should be paying for? Is that part of the recommendation?
Yeah, I think honestly, Councilmember Saccharin, one of the issues you're going to have that issue if we were here or if we weren't here. It's hard to find employees. Lori's going through it right now with the lifeguards, and you're going through it with the people that you have. So one of the things that is a little bit easier in hiring is these full-time positions that have benefits and health insurance and things like that. They're the ones that are on hold. We're saying that they're the ones we're bringing back. You're going to probably address hourly wages annually on these things. And it's interesting, a high school kid, if they can get $2 more an hour somewhere else, they're probably going.
Yes,
And it's just really hard to get them. So it's there's a lot of creative ways. Laurie's done some good ones. But yes, you're right. It is an issue. But one of those positions that would like to see come back is a park ambassador. And during COVID, Laurie sent her staff out into the parks. They weren't programming anything, but what they were eyes and ears for everything. And safety is a really big concern. If people are out there, they can see things, they can talk to the citizens, and they can probably unlock a restroom and lock a restroom as well, or clean one.
And
So, yes.
has a question as well.
Tom, I will agree with you. Restrooms are a must. Pretty much every project we ever look at as a city, and has a public purpose, that's really the first thing that always comes up. And I mean, think about it. Do you want to eat at a restaurant that has a nasty bathroom? Do you want to go to a place that has a nasty bathroom? It's no matter what we do, it's a minor thing, but I think it represented a couple $1 million in the line item budget to improve the restroom. So that's quite a hefty improvement, but much needed. I like Councilmember Gregory. Actually, I'm a little bit surprised, but I'm not at the same time because we have such an amazing department. I was happy to see that in a lot of cases, especially in the number of parks we have per our 10,000 people, we're actually a lot better than the national average in that regard. Your group has looked at, I'm sure, many parks and recreations programs across the country. How do we stack up currently to some of the other departments? Would you consider us an average or an upper echelon, or would you say that we drastically need improvement, just in your personal opinion, working with other parks and recs programs around the country?
Pat, can I at least start
Sure.
on this answer?
Yeah.
I'm coming
Yeah,
out
go
of my chair. You know, it's interesting. It all depends on what we're actually measuring and comparing it to. I can tell you this: there are very few departments that take care of their citizens' needs better than the city of Charleston. Period. When you're delivering milk to people that live in your city, you know why in the world you exist. The issue that you have, and Councilmember Griffin, it knocked you off the chair, but it knocked everybody else off the chair. There are facilities and capital things that haven't been kept up with, and I hate to be so direct. That's where the large numbers come with. So how does that compare? Honestly, it's not, you're in the same boat as everybody else. Government doesn't have an unlimited amount of money to just give to everything. You have to prioritize. But with a great department, with everybody using it, your facilities become deteriorated. And I don't care what the facility, just look at swimming, what you're dealing with just aquatics. So I think this department stacks up very, very well as it relates to serving the people that you have. Everybody that works there knows why they get up in the morning, they know who they serve, and they get that done. But without being overly direct, you have not funded the capital things like they needed to be funded.
And just to follow up there, and the reason I say that is because everybody on this committee, everybody in this department, everybody in the city knows how amazing our staff are. We have the best staff. I would put our staff up against any department across the country.
Yes.
I think, you know, I hate to keep harping on that $117 million, but that is the elephant in the room, because as we go through this amazing plan that you've put together, if we had an endless bank account, we would just sign off on it right now and fund every single one of these projects. But we can't do that.
Right.
And we certainly can't put that burden back on our taxpayers at this moment, especially coming out of a pandemic. So is there going to be a way for us to be able to prioritize exactly what needs to be done now compared to what can be done over a greater length of time? You know, because to me,
if I may, the answer to that question is yes, and that's going to be a council decision in terms of how we prioritize, whether or not we even deal with that figure. And I think that Tom mentioned that early on. So that's going to be our decision, Harry,
right?
In
But
terms of how we do this thing and how we prioritize it, because I know where you're going, and I'm in the same place. We have a whole bunch of priorities. We have a number of priorities that may also call for a bond referendum.
Yeah.
Okay. So
well, my point is just, I understand there are probably things that we can't wait on. You know, restroom upgrades is one that is something that's very, very important. But I hope that no matter what our council decides, you guys in such a wealth of knowledge will still be a part of the equation to help us prioritize.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we have the data for you to get that done. But all council members have different priorities, and that's okay. But you've got a good council. You'll compromise and you'll come up with something. But if we weren't in this room and we weren't talking about referendum and you didn't know what it was, Jason would find a way to bring his Band-Aids out after he gets a couple million here and a couple million here to make us live for another year. What we're trying to do is set you on a track so that we can keep ongoing maintenance of these facilities so that the public can use them.
Thank you.
And it's not just upkeep of bathrooms. We have parks where there aren't bathrooms.
That's right.
Okay?
Exactly.
All right.
Popular, very popular parks.
Right.
And a quick question, but one thing that I've not heard, but that I do hear from my constituents, lighting in parks. Did that come up at all?
It
did.
did. It did under the guide of safety.
Okay.
And so what you will see in some of these numbers that are astronomical numbers, you won't see light bulb prices, but you'll see the term lighting, and that could be field lighting, that could be any type of lighting. But safety, Councilmember Gregory, has come up, and lighting is one of the solutions towards safety.
Yeah. He's got a few more slides here.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, we had a great meeting with the Parks Conservancy, more than one actually. And we looked at trying to have an annual retreat on each other's calendars where you're making sure you're not stepping on each other's toes, where you're actually doing the things that you're both best at. And the Parks Conservancy understands they're going to be in the fundraising business. Charleston County PRC, it's interesting, but the rural recreation programs are good, but rural keeps going away in Charleston. More and more people become urban. Johns Island used to be a bunch of tomato farms, not anymore. So, in fact, I'll tell you an interesting fact. James Island was a rural recreation program at one point in time. So that shows those changes. So we also are recommending just a close tie with Charleston County PRC to make sure that that you're each able to do your own things for the citizens that you serve, because you're serving the same citizens.
Yep.
Next. Yeah. The other thing about partnerships, Berkeley County Schools have land up along the Kane-Hoy corridor, and they were wise to buy a lot of it before they need it. 50 years from now, they're going to need it. But there needs to be discussions with Berkeley County Schools, which they are interested in having these discussions on the city's use of this land. The other thing that I do know that's going on is the Trust for Public Land is working with Supervisor Cribb and Berkeley County on their own Greenbelt program, which is similar to Charleston County's Greenbelt program. The interesting thing about Charleston, we talk about, oh, we're going to use Greenbelt money for that. We're going to use Greenbelt money for that. But Daniel Island and Kane-Hoy Road, we can't use Greenbelt money for that because it's Berkeley County. So I believe that's going to be coming soon, but the city of Charleston needs to be in Commissioner Cribb's office, making sure that their fair share is given to them. The other thing in Berkeley County, I mentioned Matt Sloan's name more than I guess I should, but we were able to meet with him, and he is more than willing to work with the city in usage of land right now. So we think there's an opportunity along Kane-Hoy Peninsula to work in a partnership with the school district and Berkeley County and private developers before you have to walk in and buy big tracts right now.
In terms of the flooding and resiliency, that's a topic that keeps coming up. But there's a lot of park-based solutions, and you're already starting at some of that. But the collaborations, the Army Corps of Engineers wall, and putting trails around that when it's done, continuing with the Dutch dialogue solutions. And then, the public parks can be a key part of that stormwater management. So there's a large need for more open space in the community. And this is one way to fill some of that with land that can fulfill both needs for parkland and stormwater management area.
Is there any discussion with regard to using any of our parks? You know, we talked about the Dutch dialogue for retention. And, you know, once the water subsides, it's a park again. I mean, they do that in many places.
And that works. Yeah, they do. And it works well for certain types of facilities, but not others. You know, you don't want to put a bunch of playgrounds that are going to be flooded and those kind of things, but just large open natural areas, you know, open fields, those kind of things are great for that type of an environment.
Well, I was a little beyond that. I was thinking, you know, I'm still thinking Brittlebank Park. Okay.
Sure.
Is potentially an unbelievable retention area. Okay.
Yep.
And so I'm just trying to make sure that when we think parks, et cetera, we do actually calculate some of the recommendations from the Dutch dialogue and some of what we learned on our trip.
Yes, absolutely. And if you'll notice, we have actually recommended Brittlebank to be looked at and actually remaster planned, and that'll all be a part of it. But it's interesting, Councilmember Gregory, it's almost like a flip of what you said. Instead of using some of your parks for drainage, the city has already has great examples of like, I guess, the townhouses that are over in the West Ashley area that were taken down. So that they took that down and that became a park. And now it's certainly stormwater retention 70% of the year. And the other part, it's used as a park. So we see that working very frequently. The other thing that is on the top part of that is there's a lot of really important, interesting projects being talked about now. The Army Corps wall, things like that. We just think that if they're going to do that and spend all that money, they need to incorporate some park things, trails, walkways all around the water. That's what the people are asking for. So yes, we have been tuned into that.
And one final one is the department should, both the Parks and Recreation departments should try to look for CAPRA certification, which is a national certification, just showing excellence in the Parks and Recreation department. It's just showing that, you know, it's like you have your police and fire departments are all accredited. You'd do the same for them as well. It's a large step, but it's just showing that type of excellence that you pursue. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see what any other comments and questions you might have. We tried to give a quick summary of everything in the plan. There's a lot in the 500 or so pages. So I'm going to see if there's any other questions or comments you have at this point.
Yes, sir. I have a question. Looking through this, spreadsheet of all the different parks, I didn't see the new Daniel Island Rec Center. Is it on there?
Yeah.
Could be.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah, we knew about it. We looked at it. We went through it.
But is it under? Would it be under? You think planned parks because it hadn't opened yet?
Yeah, it hadn't opened. It wasn't open when we were doing our assessment of the parks.
Okay, perfect. It's probably
yeah.
I just missed
Yeah,
it.
I can just check to make sure it's in there.
Pretty nice.
Yep.
It is very nice.
Very nice.
I'll wait till we have a council meeting over there.
Are there any more questions? Yes, Councilman Shealy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I love the enterprise manager thing, and I think it's great. I know you said you don't want to do it tied to their, tied to the amount of money they're bringing in, but I could see that person immediately paying for themselves and then some. I mean, wouldn't that be a first step to try to generate some income into our parks?
I think it's first, second, third, fourth step. I think this could grow so big, but having that person in there to just get it off the ground. You have great parks, you have great facilities. People want to use them and people will pay, but you should get the money, not the vendor.
Right.
Well, the split should be there.
Right.
But you've got to get your share for this. It's your land. Your taxpayers are paying for it, and you should be compensated for that use.
Any more questions? Mayor,
No.
Mayor Tecklenburg?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Tom and Pat, again. I hope my colleagues sense from this summary presentation how thoughtful, how inclusive you've been. And I really think we're kind of at a crossroads of, trying to go to the next quantum level, the next step of improving a good system into a great system, not just the facilities, but the programs that we offer. And as I said when we started, beyond the necessity of everybody be safe, I can't think of anything that the city does that contributes more to our citizens' quality of life on an everyday basis. You might argue that the school system, has more of an everyday impact. We're not in charge of that. Of the things we're in charge of, having great park and great recreation programs is just essential to our citizens and their quality of life. So I know we need to digest this a little bit. That one of the recommendations to bring this forward is to put some skin in the game and ask our citizens if they would be willing to participate. According to the field survey work that Tom and Pat have done, they indicate they would be able to be willing to help pay for thoughtful improvements to both parks and rec programs in our city. So unfortunately, just the timing of the delivery here and the legal requirements to get on that question on the ballot this November, if we were to take that question forward, timeline is very tight. And so we are going to look at that over the next couple of weeks in terms of priorities and numbers and what we think a reasonable request would be to our citizens. Now, Councilmember Griffin duly noted, that number is a big number. And the way I look at it is like paying for the Ravenel Bridge, it was a $500 million project. You didn't get all the money in one place. You had to get some from the feds and some from the county and some from the city and some from the state. And to achieve this kind of transformational goal for our park and rec system, we're going to have to do the same thing. We're going to have to ask our citizens to play a role and pay a piece of it. We're going to have to hire an enterprise manager and try to operate where we can, like Tom has shown us he did at the county system to quote, make a little money where we can on where it's appropriate. We will need to rely on our charitable friends who are well positioned to help us with the Charleston Parks Conservancy and the Friends of the Lowline, best examples. We'll have to apply for grants, and there's infrastructure money out there. We just applied for a grant for the Lowline. So it will end up taking a real combination of efforts. And one I didn't mention, where those parks like Brittlebank is in a TIF district, the West Edge TIF district, which I think will perform well over the next 10 years. and maybe we could pay for, strategically located ones that are in tax increment finance districts. We could fund those improvements coming from those sources. So my point is, I'd like to come to council soon with a proposal to put this on the ballot this November so we can go ahead and get started and set this vision for the next 10 years, make it a reality. But it'll be, a thoughtful, reasonable request that I think our citizens will support, but understanding we'll be funding for this over a 10-year period from any number of sources.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thoughtful and reasonable is where we have to get to as a council to determine that amount. Councilman Griffin.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to take away from this masterfully done presentation, masterfully done document that I feel is the direction that we need to go as a city over the next decade plus, as you said, Mr. Mayor. But I feel like we're doing a disservice by trying to lump in this bond referendum into this executing this master plan. I feel like those are two totally different things. One is the game plan and the blueprint for the recreation and the Parks and Rec Department. The other is how we're going to fund it. We approve master plans all the time. We've approved several in the last few years, and we've never tied in a referendum or bond referendum into it and forced our hand in that way. I think it would be grossly inappropriate at this time today to say that we're going to put the burden back on our taxpayers through a bond referendum because there are so many unanswered questions. The only number that has been thrown out as of this point is $117 million. We have to expect that that number is going to get out there. And as we talked about and I brought up today, we have to make sure that our citizens fully understand what a bond referendum is. And that, in a simple form, is a tax increase. So I am very, very much appreciative and happy to endorse and accept this master plan today. But I feel like I would be doing a gross injustice to my constituents to say that I'm going to support us raising taxes as of today when we don't even know exactly how much money we're going to ask for. I understand that the time frame is short, but we have to know what that number is before we can approve any sort of referendum or at least take a vote on it. So I was prepared to vote on endorsing this master plan today, but I will not do so if that has an attachment of a bond referendum saying that.
If I may, Mayor, I think our vote is to approve the master plan. While the master plan has recommendations with regard to a referendum, okay, that's a separate issue.
That's
that
correct.
has to be voted on separately. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, what we're voting on right now, okay, is approval of the master plan as submitted. This does not include the bond referendum. That's
Correct.
separate. We all gonna sit down as council members and we gonna sit and discuss, okay, how much we can afford, okay? And when I say we, I'm talking about as a citizen also, we could afford to do for a referendum. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, I think that's the path we're on.
So moved.
Okay.
Thank you for
Is
that
there a second?
clarification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Moved and properly seconded that we approve the master plan as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposes? The ayes have it. First phase is done, Jason. Is there any other business come before this committee?
I've got one
Yes,
more.
Councilmember Griffin.
We have a joint meeting coming up on Monday, correct? Public safety.
Public safety and community development.
No, I think this committee has a,
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
have we got the agenda for that yet?
I haven't seen it.
It should go out tomorrow with the other agendas for council.
Okay, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Del Chapo, did you have? Okay. If not, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, folks. Mayor.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, y'all. Thank you.
Thanks,